We'll go ahead and call this meeting of the Urbana City Council Committee of the Whole to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Shenworth, Mr. Hayes, present. Ms. Huth, Ms. Pat, present. Mr. Otto, present. Mr. Whalen, here. Ms. Wyman,
Here.
Mayor Satterthwaite,
Here.
All right, we'll note that all committee members except Ms. Huth is here, and Mayor Satterthwaite and staff are here as well. Next is the, is there any staff report? No staff report. Mayor, no staff report? Okay. Next is the approval of minutes of the previous meeting. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion by Ms. Pat, second by Mr. Whalen. Are there any corrections or additions? All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Those pass. Next is public input. For those who are interested in speaking to the public, there are yellow cards at the back. Please fill those out and bring them up to the clerk. You can speak for up to 5 minutes. First person or people to speak will be Pat Hanlon, Laura Huth, and Bob Carey on Habitat for Humanity, 40 East Main Street, Champaign.
As you all know, I am a member of the Urbana City Council, a position I have held for nearly 8 years. As you all likely also know, I recently accepted the position of Executive Director at Habitat for Humanity of Champaign and Piatt Counties. I joined the staff in early January. Over the last 12 years, Habitat's been doing work in the community. They have occasionally used city or home consortium monies to prep lots for building homes for low-income families in our community. However, in all of 2003, no monies were awarded to Habitat from either home or CDBG funds. None were requested. Also, no lot approvals were voted on either in 2003 for Habitat. I should also note that to date, during my tenure at Habitat, the organization has also not accepted any monies or property from the City of Urbana or from the consortium. Earlier this year, it was brought to the city's attention and to my attention that a waiver or exception from the U.S. Housing and Urban Development Department was needed due to a potential appearance of a conflict of interest situation. We did not realize that recusals and vote abstentions did not meet HUD requirements, although these are procedures acceptable under state law. HUD regulations require that I disclose this potential conflict to all participating consortium members publicly in order to apply for and receive this waiver from HUD, and that is what I'm here before you to do tonight. Habitat for Humanity is seeking actively to move forward to address this issue, and we appreciate your time. I would respectfully request that a copy of this communication be reflected in this body's minutes. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Next is Dr. Umesh Thakur of 300 South Goodwin, number 209, Urbana, on the at-large seats and ethics conflicts of interest.
Hello and very good evening to all of you. Thank you for giving me a few minutes of your time. First, let me introduce myself, since this is the first time I've participated in the public hearing.
Can you speak up?
Yeah.
Thank you.
First, let me introduce myself because it's the first time I've participated in the public hearing. I've shared the statement with you. I'll not go over each and every aspect of it, but I'll just go through it briefly. I'm Umesh Thakur, and I'm an Urbana resident since February 13th of 1995 when I joined the university. I'm currently a senior research scientist at the National Center for Supercomputing Applications. For the past 9 years and 7 months today, I have worked with Urbana schools, with students, teachers, parents, and school administrators very closely. A recent report that is actually being passed around is a copy for the mayor and the council, features Urbana students. I've traveled all across the country, in fact all 50 states. In many places I've shared the work of Urbana, like Alaska, Hawaii, Texas, and so forth. Anyway, I'm very honored to be here, and I'm also honored to serve in the City of Urbana Community Development Commission. My council member is Ms. Wyman, and I sincerely thank Mayor Satterthwaite for his kind recommendation for me to serve on this commission. And of course, I appreciate the council's support and trust. I have actually enjoyed contributing to the commission. I acknowledge my colleague, staff member Bob Groovy there. And one of the things that we've been discussing a whole lot is the analysis of impediments to fair housing. And one of the things that you will have noticed that there's a language there. It talks about resource centers to create informal learning communities for students, teachers, and their parents. Anyway, from June 2003 to 2004, I was invited to serve as a program officer at the National Science Foundation, focusing on education technology. I've had many opportunities to learn what's happening in the schools, districts, and universities across the country. Even while I was at NSF, I would return once a month back to campus to work on my activities here, along with the commission work. At times, of course, I could not participate. One of them was the meeting that the commission as well as the city council was part of on the January 28th, when I actually participated remotely. And I want to thank Mr. Greavy and the mayor and the legal office of Urbana to actually accept my remote participation as an attendance to the meeting. Anyway, one of the things that I want to discuss are two topics. And these topics, speaking just for myself, I consider very important. First, I'm pleased that the Urbana community has begun the discussion about having 2 at-large seats. I support the decision of 2 at-large seats. I believe that the Council for the City of Urbana would greatly benefit with and from a diverse body in terms of race, gender, ethnicity, as well as political ideology. I hope in the coming election there will be more Urbana residents, such as active teachers, retired teachers, parents, students of Urbana schools who have graduated and are at the university or at Parkland College, as well as businessmen and women, and of course immigrants such as myself. I encourage the Council to have further discussions about the at-large seats with residents from across the city. I believe that to achieve a true participatory democracy, one must open the doors of representation to as many people as possible, especially those who have different perspectives. We need to create an environment of trust and respect so that everyone, each and every one of us, can participate. Secondly, I am pleased that the Council has begun to take the cause of an ethics ordinance. This is very important. Even in a small community such as Urbana, any appearance of personal benefit or gain, any appearance at all, is a conflict. As a program officer, I can assure you, I took conflicts very seriously because I had to award people millions of dollars. For example, I would not review any proposals from the state of Illinois, not even from University of Illinois, but from the state of Illinois. I would not even be part of the discussion. I would leave the room if anything came about from anyone from Illinois. When I would invite experts from around the country to help me review the panels, I would make sure that they had no conflict of any proposal, even small and insignificant. Sometimes the conflicts about financial matters. Sometimes the conflicts about collaborators, employers, partners, and friends, and so forth. I'm pleased that the discussion about conflicts and ethics has begun, and I applaud the Council to continue that. Let me conclude, in case if there's any doubt, that I do not belong to Democratic Party, Republican Party, or the Green Party. I am an independent. And that's because I don't believe in going left or right. I like to move forward, and hopefully fast. My basic philosophy could be described in 4 words: the pursuit of happiness. To me, in my opinion, and it's just my opinion, those are the 4 most powerful words in the English language, or any language for that matter. Anyway, thank you for taking the time to listen to me. I'll be glad to take any question or comment you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Thacker. And Council should note that when Mr. Hayes is finished looking at it, there's this wonderful silicon carbon culture combing codes through the arts, humanities, and technologies booklet, and it includes discussion of Urbana schools in it and Dr. Thacker's work. So we appreciate you sharing that with us as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Gabe Omoasagi of 2409 North High Cross.
Hello. I don't want to make this a habit, but sometimes there are things that you see and I just can't shut up. In my general perusal of the papers last week, I see that I must have missed a very important meeting last week. it's, of course, I know that when I come in here and I talk to you guys, everybody just stares at me. And, I have no agenda. I'm not a politician. I have nothing, but I like to kid liberals because you're liberals, and I find that interesting. I usually don't understand where you go, how you come up with what you do. But interestingly enough, the doctor just mentioned some things, but I'd like to talk about the conflict of interest that has come up that you guys have talked about a little bit. Well, it's not a question of, you're going to recuse yourself, or you're going to do this, or you're going to do that. It's a municipality. You depend on tax dollars, and the fact remains that Caesar's wife must be above suspicion. You don't, get in a situation where you take a job where you know that most of the finances will be coming from the city. And, of course, usually people who think like you would say that, money is not important. We're doing it because we want to serve the people. We want to build houses for the poor, etc., etc. Well, now Laura has a job where you have to responsible for building houses for the poor. Habitat has a very good reputation, but obviously now they're going to be deprived of, I think by my calculation, about $300,000. One would say that a reasonable person would probably say, well, I have to make a choice. Either I want to keep serving the city on the council, or I get rid of my job. Well, I know she's saying she's not dynamic. She's a hard worker. But the fact remains, though, that if I were in her shoes, I'd probably say, I've caused you guys enough problem. I'll ease out and probably say I will actually forfeit my salary, because, of course, it's never about money when it comes to liberals, So I would do that. But it's a big conflict of interest, and it's interesting that this will come up in this situation, especially when the city legal council had advised her about it, and she had let this thing drag on until this time. Well, the mayor said, when the mayor was interviewed, he said, obviously she has to give up one or the other. She said, that's interesting. No, it's not interesting. When the mayor was appointed, when he was elected mayor, he had a business that he was running, but it was going to be a conflict. So he gave one up. He gave up his business. That's what you expect of people who have the public interest at heart. Then, of course, we also heard, which I'd never known about, that Miss Chenoweth, tried to get $20,000 from the city for some venture. It's always for the poor. There's a catch-all, minorities and poor. But interestingly, that was supposed to be part of her contribution to partner up with her friend. If I want to buy something, if I want to partner up with somebody, I use my own money. But if I don't have any money, I go to the bank and I sign for it. I do it. Like I say, Caesar's wife should be above suspicion. When it comes to, another thing that I just had to address this, the unfortunate incident that happened in Champaign, where somebody died from carbon monoxide poisoning. And interestingly enough, in reading through it, the people had said they had been to the tenants union to make a report, and the tenants union said, we don't keep formal complaints on file. That is news to me. That is news to me, especially when it had something to do that was life-threatening. Because I had been reported to the tenants union before for when a tenant asked me to come move her luggage from one room to the other. When I talk to the students, when they go to the tenants union, what they tell me is that the tenants union said, before we even talk to you, you got to file a complaint. And then it's filed. Then you have all these numbers of complaints, and it's a question of giving a dog a bad name so you can hang him. But obviously, it's not true. They do take formal complaints. And I don't know why she said that. This is from the News Gazette. Everybody can check it out. And of course, if you talk of conflict of interest, when she was appointed to be a member of the city council, I thought it might be a conflict. She's going to be voting on city ordinances and zoning issues. She has her favorite landlords. I'm not one of them. And I know why I'm not one of them. I don't belong to the typical liberal attitude that nobody can make it in America because America is so is biased against immigrants and blacks and women and children or whatever it is. That's always the point of view. Interestingly, Jesse Jackson said the same thing about Arnold Schwarzenegger when they said, how come Arnold made it? He said, well, he hit the lotto. It doesn't happen to everybody all the time. It does happen, and of course it does not represent what she thinks.
Excuse me, you're almost out of your 5 minutes.
Well, yes, I know that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I don't know why she said it, but they do take formal complaints. Is it because Mr. Pearl is also an alderman in Champaign? Is that why she said that? I have no idea. But, like I say, when it comes to ethics, not only should it be that you should be above board, but any idea, anything that could be regarded as suspicious should be avoided, since his wife must be above suspicion. Thank you.
Are there any questions?
There are usually no questions. Nobody wants to tangle with me.
Ms. Chandler?
Yes.
Just because you repeat a lie doesn't mean it's true.
Okay.
And I would strongly urge you to look at the record and see that the statement that you've made on the council floor this evening is untrue.
Well, tell me, I made several statements. Which one is untrue?
The something about Ms. Chenoweth tried to get $20,000 for some venture for the poor.
What was it? To straighten me out.
The city of Urbana purchased equipment, wireless equipment, and my housemate offered to do free consulting to help with that purchase.
Well, that's not what
I know that's not what the mayor said.
Also, are you calling the mayor a liar?
Yes.
Oh, you see, that's where we go. You see, in this society, politics can't be everything. You can't make politics everything. And obviously, you guys sit here and try to derail anything the mayor is doing. And I think he's the most reasonable person among all of you.
Thank you, Mr. Omasagi.
Well, I'm answering a question.
Oh, I think you answered. Did he?
No, I'm not done. I'm not done. She just called the mayor a liar. He's not a liar. And I would go to bat for him any day rather than you.
He is almost never a liar. That's correct.
Almost never. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we'll move on to item number 5, Grants Management Division titles. Is that Dr. Tyler, Mr. Brewery? Thank you. Mr. Brewery, are you going to be presenting all of these at the same time, items A through D, or do you want individually?
I think we could do them in bulk.
Okay. Just to note, for the public, item 5, Grants Management Division titles, there's A, ordinance number 2004-09-121, an ordinance approving a City of Urbana Community Development Block, I believe that's a block, grant program agreement, Historic East Urbana Neighborhood Association, HUNA, project number 040501. Item B is ordinance number 2004-09-122, an ordinance approving a City of Urbana Neighborhood Organization Grant Program Agreement, United Citizens and Neighbors, UCAN, project number 040502. Item C is ordinance number 2004-09-123, an ordinance approving a City of Urbana Neighborhood Organization Grant Program Agreement, Ecological Construction Laboratory Project number 040503, and item D, ordinance number 2004-09-124, an ordinance approving a City of Urbana Neighborhood Organization Grant Program Agreement. Is that included in what you're going to be discussing? In this, East Street Development Corporation.
Yes.
Project number 040504, that's operating from the corrected agenda. Mr. Brewer?
Thank you. Right, so we have 4 neighborhood organization grant projects or agreements here, and the ordinances that would adopt those. These were included in our annual action plan for 0405 as adopted by council. It's important to note a little differences between the agreements. The historic East Urbana neighborhood organization, HUNA, is the only agreement that's funded with CDBG funding. And it contains all the standard CDBG terms and conditions that we've had in previous NOG agreements. The balance of the agreements, United Citizens and Neighbors, Ecological Construction Laboratory, East Street Development Corporation, are funded with neighborhood improvement funds and community development sync funds. And as such, we've edited those a bit to remove the reference to the CDBG funding. But in effect, the agreements are more similar than not. You'll note in the agreements, attachment C provides the specific scope of work associated with each of the agreements or projects. Basically the same. They're nearly identical except for the dollar amount and the scope of work. We've also included a reference to the NOG guidelines. Community Development Commission reviewed the agreements and forwarded a favorable recommendation to council, and we've also provided you a copy of those CDC minutes from our March meeting and a copy of the applications for reference. That being a bit of the background, staff recommends approval.
Are there any questions for staff? Mayor Satterthwaite?
Yeah, Bob, as I was looking through some of these, and I know you put in for our reference the neighborhood organization grant program guidelines, and one of those, obviously, for a neighborhood organization grant is that the organization must be geographically a geographically based neighborhood organization. And I'm kind of wondering on a couple of these how they meet that definition. The two in particular that are the Eco Lab, which is like a housing development organization, and the Eads Street Corporation, which is another development corporation. How do those meet the qualifications?
That's a good point, Mayor. And I guess CDC and staff at this juncture were pretty liberal in our interpretation of the NOG agreement there, basically benefiting our low-income target areas in affordable housing pursuits, I think was the rationale there.
Sorry.
So what you're saying is, even though it doesn't really meet the definition of a neighborhood organization, we said give them the grant anyway.
In a sense, I think they had a desire to build capacity with these organizations, and yeah, I guess you could say that we might have stretched the guidelines a bit.
Well, is it? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't when we're funding organizations such as this with affordable housing money, isn't there a certain amount that can be used for administrative funds, grants?
You're right. Historically, the NOG awards have come out of our CDBG administrative cap at 20%.
Oh, but I mean,
I'm sorry.
If when we give a grant to an organization, they're allowed to use a portion of that for their administrative purposes, are they not?
We haven't done so many of those that I'm not sure if we have a cap.
We're able to dedicate a certain amount of the home funds directly to Chodo administration.
5% is dedicated, right?
Yeah.
But I don't recall, but by project, if we give them $50,000, only X of the 50 could be used for administration. Frankly, I don't know if we've funded much administration beyond this NOG program. Most of our CDBG investments have been in brick and mortar, with the exception of public service funding.
I was just wondering if there might be a better place for this money to come from for those housing development corporations or organizations rather than the neighborhood organization money. Because as for some of these housing, affordable housing developers, I'm not quite sure what neighborhood it is that's being represented or served.
you want to respond?
If I could, I think you're right, Mayor. I think when we look at the CDBG programming and the administration, there are opportunities where we might structure something more like a technical assistance program that might be more of a niche that for some of these endeavors that we kind of struggle with our existing NOG format and guidelines.
Do you have more questions, Mayor? Ms. Pat? And then Ms. Chenoweth after her.
The community development block grant funds have to be used in one of the two community development target areas, is that correct, that are identified by HUD?
That's our preference, that we can say that they're being in the target area, then we're benefiting a given population. Yes, that's preferred.
Isn't that required for CDBG?
It is. It's just not, I think we have to meet a 70% test, but we always want to make that closer to 100.
Right, okay, that's good. Now, what type of restriction is there for the community development SYNC funds? Does that money also have to be spent in community development block grant areas?
No, I'm not aware of that.
Okay. And the neighborhood improvement funds, what is the source of those funds?
I understand that it was a NIF program, a neighborhood improvement program that was built in and around the Carl neighborhood some time ago.
So this is not federal money. This is the money that's that came from the sale of houses. Was it?
I don't recall the origin of it, but
it was from the Carl development.
I believe so. Right.
Okay. Which now leads to my question. This is a follow-up on the mayor's questions. Other than the historic East Urbana neighborhood organization neighborhood agreement, or I'm sorry, what's it called? Neighborhood organization grant, which is community development block grant money and has to be spent in the community development area which that neighborhood is. These other two do the agreements restrict the geographic area in which these funds can be spent?
I think the restriction goes back to the NOG guidelines, not a federal or funding guideline, but our own internal NOG.
And are we, all right, for example, the ecological construction laboratory, can that money be spent anywhere, or can that money only be spent on activities in community development block grant areas?
I think they targeted the target area, our CD target area.
That was my understanding.
Right.
That's all I make clear. So, and is the same true for East Street Development Corporation?
Mr. Johnson's application wasn't as detailed. It was affordable housing pursuit, which by and large has been in those areas by default.
Okay. I guess if I can just, this is not really a question, but just a statement. It was my understanding when I looked at all this that all four of these grants were restricting funds to the community development block grant areas, that only one is a restriction required by an outside entity, the federal government, but that our agreements with these other three entities included restricting the activities to the CDBG target areas. And if that's not correct, that I think that unless someone can explain why that would be a bad idea, that would be the appropriate way to address the concern the mayor raised.
Ms. Chenoweth?
I wasn't unaware that we were going to speak on all the items all at once. I'm going to recuse myself from this conversation and the vote due to a potential perceived conflict of interest.
Thank you. If the clerk so notes that. Are there further questions? I apologize. Didn't realize there was, Ms. Chenoweth was going to need a recusal. I would have called earlier.
Sorry.
Are there further questions? Mr. Hayes?
Yeah, I'd just like to ask a question. You recall a couple of years ago there was a neighborhood organization called the North Broadway, and we gave them a community neighborhood organization grant, which is not in the target area, I don't think.
I think the better part of the area is, I'd have to double check my map.
No, I'm just saying, if that was a precedent, then
Okay.
then maybe we need to maybe go along with these and then straighten it out. For the next time that we have these the neighborhood organization grants.
And I have a question, as long as no other council questions, and that is, in the Community Development Commission, when they reviewed this, there wasn't any concern about the requirement that some, like the Historic East Urbana Neighborhood Association, needs to be and is in the target area, and the others that aren't required to be in the target areas might not necessarily be completely in that target area. Is that...
I think at the staff level, we kind of plugged in the funding to the projects that more we're going to meet that goal of the CDBG funding, and so we sort of divvied up who was funded with what funding source, and CDBG took our recommendation. It really wasn't a matter of discussion. The commission seems to very favorable view on capacity building at the local level, and again, I think that's why we find ourselves stretching a bit.
Okay. Thank you. Are there further questions? Is there a motion to send this to council with a recommendation for approval?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Ms. Pat, second by Mr. Hayes. Is there discussion?
I think there's just a typo on
On the bottom of page 1 of the memo, last paragraph, third line, these agreements do as...
thank you.
And not to.
Very good.
Okay, all in favor, please signify...
One moment, please. Ms. Wyman, I'm sorry, maybe I wasn't paying attention closely enough. Was this moved as a single item or as an omnibus?
This, I believe, was moved as an omnibus. I listed all of these items, or I read each of these items. Sorry, so, Ms. Pat, was that a motion of
The
omnibus?
motion was for items 5A through D.
Mr. Hayes, was that your understanding as your second? Okay. As such, we've got an omnibus motion for, or a motion for items 5A, B, C, and D in omnibus form. Mayor Satterthwaite, do you have further comment?
Well, I think that, I don't have any problem with these particular grants. I think we need to tighten up our system a little bit, because these, in my mind, clearly do not meet the guidelines that we have established. Two of these organizations are not neighborhood organizations at all, and in fact are housing developers. And so if we want to continue to fund these types of organizations with this grant program, the grant program needs different guidelines, different criteria, because the two obviously do not match. And even Ms. Pat's desire to have the activities take place in the Community Development Block Grant area, when there are such things in the scope of service such as establishing 501c3 status for the organization, it's hard to say how that specifically benefits the CDBG area. Isn't that, or is that something that organization should be doing on its own? So, I think it's, these small amounts of money can help these organizations very greatly, but I think if we're going to continue to approve this type of a grant, we need to look at our guidelines, and if we want to make sure that, whether it's CDBG money that's being used or not, and we want the money to be targeted in the CDBG area, we need to make that a criteria, and then we need to follow the criteria. It just needs a little tightening up.
Ms. Pat?
Thank you. Actually, I've just chatted for a moment with Ms. Tyler, and thinking about it more, probably the main focus, since this is not community development block grant money, the main focus should possibly not be on the geographic location for not-for-profit housing developers, to be consistent with our interest in having affordable housing being located throughout the city and not concentrated in one place. Perhaps the more important restriction is the household income of the families or individuals who would benefit from the development efforts, even though it might well be, because of varying costs of land in different parts of the city, that the activities would end up in the CDBG target areas. But I also, if I understand correctly, or if I could just ask the mayor a question. Since we're talking about using SYNC funds, if we created some category of program or funding that were not-for-profit housing development, rather than the neighborhood organization. It seems to me even actually for some of the things that United Citizens and Neighbors has done, even though they are specific to a geographic location, in terms of the activity, some of the activity really is more about not-for-profit housing development. And I think what Mr. Gruey was saying was the intent here is to build the capacity of not-for-profit housing developers. Would that better address the concern that you're raising?
Well, I mean, I don't really have a problem with, whether it's funding the capacity of a neighborhood organization that wants to, improve the quality of the neighborhood by housing or some other means. It doesn't really need to be housing. I mean, there are a lot of other ways to improve a neighborhood. But if we want to do something with those community development sync funds and use them citywide, for instance, we should go back and take a look. I think the sync funds do have an origin in federal funding. I'm not sure exactly when that was, but wasn't that federal funding a long time ago?
No, the sync fund, the purpose of the sync fund is to cover, if you look at the financial plan, it says two things. One, it's to cover any shortfall that we have in cash flow from the federal government on the grant, and or to fund what are otherwise non-eligible block grant activities. It is, from 20 years ago, it is general fund money. It's general reserve. So, the more important question is, should we be spending the reserve? To me, that's the question. But if you decide to do it, then you need to come up with some guidelines. It would be citywide. There would be no federal strings attached because it does not have federal money in it.
There are a lot of options, but we should probably figure out what kind of program and guidelines, and then an appropriate funding source, and then apply the guidelines to the program.
Ms. Pat?
Personally, I think the use of the community development sync funds for building capacity of not-for-profit housing developers is a good thing. Though I'm open to suggestion. I hope the mayor understands from the perspective of council members. This came up at Community Development Commission, and the commission recommended approval, and the staff recommended approval. And so until you spoke tonight, I had no idea that there was any issue here. But if you want to design this differently, I'd suggest that you ask your staff to do that and take it to the CD Commission and.
Yeah, well, as I said, I don't have any problems with the grants specifically or what their purpose is, but they certainly don't meet the guidelines of the program as stated. So,
well, of the neighborhood organization grant program is a CDBG program, and I think if I understand what happened here, and that this happened last year too, was there were more applications than there were than the city had funding for, and so there were two things. There were more applications than we could fund with that money, that CDBG money, and the applications involved a variety of different activities. So those are really two different issues. But and so the way that what the staff proposed to do with it was to pull out those things that weren't neighborhood organizations and fund them with different funds. And probably the problem here is calling these neighborhood organization grants. It's really the name. So maybe we can change the name, and if we need to have guidelines for not-for-profit housing developers, that's a good idea. But if you recall, it was not that long ago when we were lamenting the lack of not-for-profit housing developers. So trying to have more in this community could only be a benefit.
Is there further comment? Okay. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. We'll note that was supported by 5 aye and Ms. Chenna with abstention.